Ethan was a man who lived a quiet life, the kind of person most people didn't really notice. Every morning before the city woke up, he would get ready for work in his small apartment on the edge of town. His clothes were always clean but old, his shoes a little worn, and his hands carried the roughness of hard work. He didn't complain. Life had taught him that sometimes silence was easier than explaining why things had turned out the way they did. Ethan worked as a janitor in a tall glass building downtown, the kind of place filled with people who wore suits, carried laptops, and barely had time to look around. Every day he swept the floors, emptied trash bins, and made sure everything was spotless before the workers arrived. To most people, he was invisible. They would pass by talking on their phones, never really seeing the man who made their offices shine. But Ethan didn't mind. He wasn't looking for attention. He was just trying to make an honest living for himself and his little daughter, Lily. Lily was the reason he kept going. She was 8 years old with golden brown hair and a smile that could light up even the darkest day. But she had been blind since birth. The doctors had told Ethan there was little chance she would ever see, but he never let her believe that she was less because of it. He always told her, "You don't need eyes to see beauty, sweetheart. You just need to feel it." And Lily believed him. Every day after finishing his shift, Ethan would pick Lily up from her special school. They didn't have much, but they had each other. On the bus ride home, she would talk nonstop about the songs she learned, the stories she heard, and the things she imagined in her mind. Ethan would listen quietly, smiling, his heart full. But inside, there was always a small ache, a memory of who he used to be before life became so hard. Long ago, Ethan had been a musician. He had played the piano since he was a teenager and dreamed of becoming a composer someday. He used to play in small cafes and bars where people clapped and called his name. Music had been his world, a language that made him feel alive. Then everything changed. His wife got sick when Lily was just a baby. The medical bills piled up and he had to sell his piano to pay for her treatment. When she passed away, Ethan's world fell silent. He stopped playing, stopped dreaming, and focused only on raising Lily. The music never left his heart, but it became something he carried quietly, like a secret he didn't know how to share anymore. At the building where he worked, there was an old grand piano in the lounge area on the top floor. No one really used it. It just sat there as decoration, polished but untouched. Sometimes, when everyone had gone home and the office was empty, Ethan would walk by and stop for a moment. He would run his fingers softly over the keys, not pressing them, just feeling their cool surface. It reminded him of what he had lost and what still waited deep inside him. One night after finishing his cleaning, he stood there longer than usual. The city lights sparkled through the big glass windows and the whole room felt calm. He finally let his hands touch the keys. The sound that came out was soft at first, almost shy, as if the piano hadn't been played in years. But then slowly the melody grew, gentle and full of feeling. It was like his heart was speaking after a long silence. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the music carry him away. In that moment, he wasn't a janitor. He wasn't a tired man struggling to make ends meet. He was simply a musician again, and a father, a dreamer, a man who still had something beautiful to give to the world. He didn't know that someone from the building had once passed by late at night and heard him play. The next morning, people had whispered that they thought they heard music in the hall, but no one ever found out who it was. Ethan never told anyone. It was his small piece of freedom, something that belonged only to him. Every note he played reminded him of his daughter. The soft keys sounded like her laughter, the gentle chords like her small hands when she held his face and said, "Daddy, you're my hero." He wanted to give her everything, even if all he had to offer was love, patience, and a few stolen minutes with an old piano. At home, he would tell Lily bedtime stories about a man who could make stars dance with music. She never knew that the man in those stories was him. To her, he was just Daddy, the man who held her hand when they crossed the street, who tied her hair in a ponytail every morning, and who made her laugh when she felt sad. Though his job was simple, Ethan carried a quiet pride in it. He believed that every task, no matter how small, deserved care. When he cleaned the floors, he made sure they shone. When he fixed a light, he made sure it stayed bright. He knew people might look down on him, but he never looked down on himself. Life had taken many things from Ethan, but it hadn't taken away his kindness or his hope. He didn't have riches or recognition, but he had something far more powerful: the will to keep going, the strength to love deeply. and the music that still lived inside his soul. He didn't know it yet, but that music, and his quiet, humble heart, would soon change not only his life but also the life of someone he never expected to meet. Lily was unlike any other child. Though she had never seen the world with her eyes, she understood it in ways that even adults couldn't. She could tell when the sun was rising just by the warmth on her cheeks. She could recognize people by the sound of their footsteps or the rhythm of their breathing. For her, the world was a song, one filled with whispers, textures, and feelings that painted pictures in her mind. Every morning, she woke up to the sound of her father humming softly in the kitchen. Ethan never needed an alarm. The smell of coffee and the sound of the kettle were enough to begin their day. "Good morning, sunshine," he would say as he placed her breakfast in front of her. Lily would giggle every time. She loved that he called her sunshine even though she had never seen the sun. At school, things weren't always easy. The other children sometimes treated her differently, unsure how to talk to a girl who couldn't see. But Lily never let that break her spirit. She had learned early on that pity was heavier than blindness. Her teachers adored her curiosity. She loved asking questions about everything. What color is laughter? What shape is kindness? Can you hear smiles? The only time she felt truly frustrated was when she heard music. The notes made her heart race, but her fingers never seemed to know where to go. One day she told her father, "I want to learn to play piano, Daddy. I want to make the sounds that make people feel." Ethan smiled, though his heart ached a little. Buying a piano was impossible. Even lessons were too expensive. But he couldn't say no to her dream. After that, Ethan began taking Lily with him to the building sometimes when he worked late. He made it their secret adventure. The security guard, an old friend of his, would smile and look the other way when he saw them. They would sneak into the top floor lounge where that grand black piano sat, shining faintly under the city lights. The first time Lily touched it, she gasped. Her small hands moved across the smooth surface, tracing the cool ivory keys. "It feels like a row of teeth," she said, giggling. Ethan laughed softly. "Careful, these teeth bite if you press them too hard." That made her laugh harder. Then very gently he guided her fingers. "Here," he whispered. "This one is middle C." He pressed it, and the note rang through the room like a heartbeat. Lily's face lit up. "It's like the sound of light," she said. Ethan's chest tightened. He hadn't played in years, but in that moment every reason he ever loved music came rushing back. He placed his hands over hers, helping her find the right keys. The melody they made was simple, hesitant, but it was beautiful. From that night on, it became their ritual. Every few evenings, when his cleaning rounds were done, they would go to the piano. Lily would sit on a stool beside him, blindfolded, not because she needed to be, but because she said it helped her see better in her mind. Together they played soft tunes that filled the empty building. Sometimes she would hum along. Sometimes he would close his eyes and just listen to her small voice rising with the music. The piano became their secret world, a place where work, pain, and struggle disappeared. In that world there was only sound, emotion, and love. Ethan began teaching her how to feel the keys, how to count the beats, how to let the rhythm guide her. She didn't read music, but she didn't need to. She learned through feeling. He would tap her hand gently and say, "Hear the space between the notes, Lily. That's where the magic lives." And she did. Within weeks, she could play small melodies on her own. Her fingers moved slowly but gracefully, as if she were tracing invisible stars across the keys. Each time she finished, she would turn toward her father and ask, "Was that good?" And Ethan, holding back tears, would smile and whisper, "It was perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect." Sometimes, as they played, the city outside glimmered through the tall glass windows. The lights reflected off the piano's surface, creating patterns like constellations. To Ethan, it looked like a dream. To Lily, it sounded like one. The low hum of cars below, the distant horns, the rain tapping softly against the windows, it all became part of their music. Ethan noticed how different Lily became when she played. She was confident, alive, unafraid. It was as if her blindness disappeared, replaced by something brighter, an invisible light that only she could see. An invisible light that only she could see. Watching her made Ethan believe that maybe, just maybe, life still held small miracles for people like them. One evening, as she played, she asked, "Daddy, Do you think people can see music? He paused, thinking. Maybe not with their eyes, he said. But the heart can see what eyes can't. She smiled and said softly, Then my heart must be full of colors. Those words stayed with him. Long after she fell asleep that night, Ethan sat by the window listening to the faint hum of the city. He thought about how hard their life had been, the bills, the long hours, the loneliness. But then he thought of Lily's laughter, her courage, and the way she made music feel new again. He realized she wasn't the one living in darkness. If anything, she was his light. Little did he know that their secret nights at the piano would soon reach someone else's ears. Someone who would be standing just beyond the door, watching the father and daughter play. And in that moment, everything would begin to change, because sometimes life hides the most extraordinary connections in the most ordinary places, like a janitor's quiet hands teaching his blind daughter how to turn silence into song. Amelia Hartman was the kind of woman who made rooms go silent when she walked in. She was confident, polished, and always in control, the CEO of one of the city's biggest corporate firms. People admired her success, even feared her a little. Every decision she made was sharp and precise, like the click of her high heels on the marble floors. But behind that confident image was a woman who had built walls so high that even she had forgotten what it felt like to let anyone in. Amelia's life looked perfect from the outside. She lived in a luxury apartment with a skyline view, drove an expensive car, and had assistants to handle everything from her meetings to her meals. Yet in quiet moments, when the city noise faded and she was left alone with her reflection, she felt something missing. She couldn't name it, but it sat heavy in her chest. There was a time when Amelia's life had been softer. As a child, she had grown up in a small house filled with laughter and music. Her father, a schoolteacher, used to play piano every night after dinner. She would sit beside him, watching his fingers dance across the keys, filling their tiny home with warmth. Those evenings were her favorite part of childhood, the sound of music wrapping around her like a hug. But when her father passed away unexpectedly, everything changed. The piano stopped playing, and her mother, heartbroken, sold it to pay bills. That was the day Amelia learned that love didn't keep the lights on, hard work did. Years later, she carried that lesson into adulthood. She worked harder than anyone else, climbing the corporate ladder one late night at a time. By 35, she was running the very company where she'd once been an intern. But the cost was steep. Friends drifted away, relationships ended before they could begin, and her heart grew quiet, just like that piano all those years ago. Amelia's office was at the very top of the building. Large windows, gold trim, a desk always spotless. Her employees respected her, but no one truly knew her. They saw her as powerful, not personal, brilliant, not warm. Even her closest colleagues only saw the CEO, never the woman behind the title. Sometimes when she worked late, she'd look out over the city lights and wonder if anyone else out there felt the same loneliness she did. She would glance at the grand piano in the lounge downstairs, a beautiful instrument she had approved for aesthetic purposes, and think how strange it was that it never made a sound. To her, it was a decoration, not a living thing. Music, after all, was something she'd left behind long ago, but fate has a quiet way of connecting people who need each other most. One rainy evening, Amelia stayed late to review an important merger proposal. The office was empty. Even the cleaning staff had finished for the night, or so she thought. She was about to leave when she heard something unusual, a faint sound drifting through the hall. It was music, and soft, hesitant, but filled with emotion. She froze. The notes came from the lounge down the corridor. At first she thought someone had left a speaker on, but the melody was too alive, too human. She followed the sound quietly, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. As she neared the door, she saw the lights dimmed and the grand piano illuminated by the city's glow through the tall windows. And there they were. A man, the janitor, she realized, sat at the piano. His hands moved with quiet grace over the keys, his head slightly bowed. Beside him sat a little girl in a school uniform, her eyes covered by a blindfold, her hands resting on top of his. The sight struck Amelia like lightning. It was so unexpected, so intimate that she forgot to breathe. The music wasn't perfect. It stumbled now and then, but it had something that most performances lacked: heart. Every note carried love, patience, and something deeper: connection. The girl's small smile, the man's gentle focus, the harmony between them. It was pure, and it made Amelia's chest tighten. She stood there, hidden behind the doorframe, her hand slowly rising to her mouth. For a moment, she wasn't a CEO. She wasn't the woman who conquered boardrooms or led a company worth millions. She was just Amelia, the little girl who once listened to her father play piano and believed that music could make sadness disappear. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't understand why. Maybe it was the melody that reminded her of home. Maybe it was the way the man looked at the girl, full of warmth and care, something Amelia hadn't seen in years. She realized she had spent so long building an empire that she had forgotten what simple love looked like. The janitor's face was calm but tired, the kind of tired that comes from years of carrying more than one person's weight. His shirt sleeves were rolled up and his hands were rough, but when they touched the piano, they were impossibly gentle. The blind girl, completely unaware of Amelia's presence, laughed softly as she missed a note. The sound was like sunlight in a dark room. Amelia didn't know how long she stood there. Minutes, maybe longer. She just watched silently, feeling something inside her begin to shift. A crack in the wall she'd spent her whole life building. When the music stopped, she stepped back quickly, afraid of being seen. Her heart was still pounding. That night, when she finally left the building, the melody followed her all the way home. Even in her penthouse, surrounded by luxury, the sound echoed in her memory. Lying in bed, she thought about the janitor. She realized she didn't even know his name. But his music, that quiet, unpolished, beautiful song, had reached her in a way nothing else had in years. For the first time in a long while, Amelia didn't fall asleep thinking about numbers, deadlines, or success. She fell asleep thinking about a man and his blind daughter playing piano in the dark, and how something as simple as that could stir the heart of someone who thought she no longer had one. That evening, the city was wrapped in a soft drizzle. Raindrops slid down the tall glass windows of the office building, glowing under the streetlights like silver tears. Inside, the building was nearly silent, the kind of stillness that only came after hours, when the echo of footsteps had faded and the hum of computers had gone quiet. Ethan moved carefully through the corridors, finishing the last of his cleaning. He had worked long enough to know which lights to leave on, which ones to turn off, and which corners always gathered dust, no matter how often he cleaned them. His body was tired, but his heart carried a quiet excitement. Tonight was a piano night, one of those rare evenings when Lily would join him, and the two of them would step out of their small world and into a magical one made of music. Downstairs, the security guard, Mr. Jenkins, gave him a knowing smile when he saw the little girl waiting by the door. "Sneaking in for another concert, huh?" the old man whispered with a wink. Lily grinned, holding her father's hand tightly. "Just a short one," Ethan said with a smile. "We won't be long." Jenkins nodded and waved them through. He liked seeing them happy. The sight always made his long nights a little warmer. They rode the elevator to the top floor. The hum of the machinery filled the space as Lily tilted her head upward, listening. "It sounds like a sleeping robot," she said, and Ethan chuckled. "Maybe it's dreaming about flying," he replied. She laughed softly. Every conversation with her made ordinary moments feel extraordinary. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped out into the quiet lounge. The grand piano stood near the tall windows, the city lights reflecting off its polished surface. It was beautiful, dark, elegant, and slightly lonely, like it had been waiting just for them. Ethan switched on a single lamp, just enough to give the room a golden glow. Outside, the rain shimmered on the glass, creating tiny rivers that looked like they were chasing each other down. "Ready, sweetheart?" he asked. Lily nodded eagerly, her blindfold already in her hand. She tied it carefully, even though she didn't need it. "It helps me imagine," she always said. Then she reached for the piano, her small fingers gliding along the cool surface. Ethan sat beside her and pressed the first key, a soft, gentle note that lingered in the air like a sigh. Lily smiled immediately. "That's our song," she whispered. He nodded, and soon both of their hands moved together. The melody began, slow, tender, full of emotion. It was a song Ethan had written years ago, back when life was simpler, when love and dreams still felt within reach, when love and dreams still felt within reach. But now the song meant something new. It wasn't just about love. It was about survival, hope, and the bond between a father and daughter who had learned to find light even in darkness. As they played, Ethan guided her through the rhythm. "Feel the heartbeat," he murmured. "Music isn't about seeing the notes, and it's about feeling them." Lily tilted her head, listening closely. "It's like hearing someone smile," she said, her voice soft. Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Exactly," he whispered. The room filled with sound, the echo of their fingers, the whisper of the rain, the quiet hum of the building around them. It was as if the whole world had stopped just to listen. Outside, the lights of the city blurred into soft colors through the rain. Inside, it was warm, safe, and alive. For Ethan, those moments were everything. It didn't matter that he was just a janitor or that their lives were simple. When he played with Lily, he felt rich, richer than all the people who worked in those offices during the day. He could have spent hours there, watching her face as she followed the music, her lips moving slightly as if she were talking to the melody. Sometimes, Lily would hum along, a sweet, airy sound that floated above the piano like a bird in the sky. Her sense of rhythm amazed him. She could hear the difference between joy and sadness in a single note. "You're better than me already," he told her once. She laughed. "That's not true, Daddy. You have stronger hands." He smiled. "Strong hands, maybe, but you have a stronger heart." They didn't notice that time had slipped away. The clock ticked quietly in the corner. The world outside soaked in silver rain. For a while, nothing existed except for the two of them and the song they were creating together. And then something happened. Something they didn't see. Beyond the door, in the dimly lit hallway, Amelia stood silently. She'd been working late again when she heard the faint notes of music floating through the corridor. The sound had pulled her from her office like a magnet. She hadn't planned to follow it, but something about the melody made her heart ache in a way she couldn't ignore. Now, hidden just beyond the doorway, she watched. The janitor she had barely noticed before sat at the piano, his sleeves rolled up, his head bowed slightly as he played with deep focus. The little blind girl beside him smiled with pure joy. The scene looked like something out of a dream, fragile, beautiful, and painfully human. Amelia's hand slowly rose to her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. She didn't know why she felt so moved, but she couldn't look away. The music spoke to something deep inside her, something she had buried under years of ambition and loneliness. Inside the room, Ethan and Lily reached the final note together. It hung in the air for a long moment, trembling softly before fading into silence. Lily clapped her hands, laughing. "We did it," she said. Ethan smiled, brushing her hair from her face. "Yes, we did." And just outside, Amelia turned away quietly, pressing her hand against her heart. She had come looking for quiet that night, but she had found something else entirely. A sound that reminded her what it meant to feel alive. She didn't know it yet, but that single song, played by a janitor and his blind daughter, would soon ripple through her life like the rain outside, gentle at first, then unstoppable. The next evening, the sky hung low with clouds, and the wind carried the chill of an approaching storm. The office building stood tall and silent against the gray skyline. Inside, most lights were off. Only a few dim glows from computer screens and exit signs flickered across the empty floors. Amelia Hartman was still in her office long after everyone else had gone home. She sat behind her desk, her eyes on a stack of reports, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She couldn't stop thinking about the music she'd heard the night before. The melody had followed her home, looping in her head like a whisper she couldn't shake. It had been simple, yet so full of feeling that it left a mark she couldn't explain. She had listened to countless songs in her life, but none had made her feel like that. None had reminded her of her father, of how his music once filled their house with warmth and love. Amelia tried to push the memory away, telling herself it didn't matter. "It was just a janitor playing with his daughter," she murmured under her breath, trying to sound detached. But even as she said it, she felt something stir inside her. Guilt, admiration, and a strange curiosity. Who was this man? How could someone who swept floors play the piano with such emotion? And that little girl? She couldn't see, yet she smiled as if she saw more beauty in the world than anyone else. Amelia leaned back in her chair, staring at the dark clouds beyond her window. The city lights reflected faintly on the glass, blurring with her own reflection. For a long moment she sat in silence. Then she stood up suddenly, as if pulled by an invisible thread, and made her way out of the office. Her heels clicked softly down the corridor. The building felt like it was holding its breath. Somewhere below, she heard faint laughter, a child's laughter. Her heart skipped. She followed the sound. As she approached the lounge, the familiar tune began again. The same melody as before, but softer this time, slower, like a whisper between friends. She stopped outside the half-open door. The room was dim, lit only by the golden glow of a single lamp. The piano shimmered under that light, and beside it sat Ethan and Lily. The father and daughter didn't know they had an audience. Ethan's back was straight, his head slightly bowed, completely lost in the music. His rough hands moved gracefully over the keys, each note flowing into the next like a story being told without words. Beside him, Lily sat with her small hands on the keys, her blindfold tied neatly, her head tilted in concentration. Her smile was soft, her lips moving silently as if she were counting the beats in her heart. Amelia couldn't move. She just stood there, hidden in the shadow of the doorway, watching. Something about the scene broke her, not in a painful way, but in a way that felt like thawing ice after a long winter. The warmth of their bond filled the room so completely that even an outsider could feel it. For years, she had surrounded herself with success, meetings, deadlines, profits, but in all that time, she had never seen anything as pure as what she was witnessing now. She watched as Ethan leaned closer to Lily, whispering instructions. "Slow down, sweetheart. Listen to the rain. Let it guide you." Lily giggled and nodded, her fingers moving more carefully. The sound that followed was beautiful, imperfect but alive. The piano blended with the soft patter of rain outside, creating a symphony that no concert hall could ever match. Amelia's vision blurred as tears welled up. She pressed a hand to her mouth, afraid that even breathing too loudly might break the spell. She couldn't remember the last time she had cried, maybe years ago when her father died. Since then, she had buried every emotion under layers of professionalism and strength. But now, with each note that echoed through the hallway, those walls began to crumble. For a moment, she saw herself in Lily, small, innocent, full of wonder. And she saw her father in Ethan, patient, gentle, and strong. It felt as though life had brought her face to face with a memory she had forgotten she needed. Ethan's hands moved faster now, playing a new part of the song. Lily laughed when she missed a note, and he chuckled too, the sound soft and full of love. Amelia found herself smiling through her tears. There was something sacred about their laughter, the kind of sound that made the world feel less lonely. Then suddenly, Lily said something that made Amelia's breath catch. "Daddy," she whispered, "do you think people can hear love?" Ethan paused, his fingers hovering above the keys. "Maybe they can," he said quietly, "if they listen closely enough." Amelia's eyes filled completely then. She turned slightly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. For a long time, she had thought love was something that only existed in childhood, something that success had to replace. But in that moment, she realized how wrong she had been. When the music finally stopped, Ethan kissed the top of Lily's head. "That's enough for tonight," he said gently. "You did amazing." Lily grinned. "You too, Daddy." They both laughed softly. Amelia stepped back quietly, her heart pounding. She didn't want them to know she had been there. Something about what she had just seen felt too private, too sacred to interrupt. She walked back down the corridor slowly, her heels no longer clicking sharply against the floor. They sounded softer now, gentler, almost uncertain. As she rode the elevator down to the lobby, the melody still played in her head. When the doors opened, the security guard looked up and greeted her politely. She nodded, but her mind was far away. That night at home, Amelia couldn't sleep. She kept seeing the janitor's hands, the little girl's blindfolded smile, the way they created beauty out of nothing but sound and love. For the first time in many years, she realized that success had given her everything, except peace. And as the rain continued to fall outside her window, Amelia Hartman, and the woman who thought she had seen it all, understood that sometimes the greatest stories unfold in the quiet corners of life, seen only by those who take the time to listen. That night, Amelia couldn't escape the music echoing in her head. It followed her like a heartbeat, gentle, persistent, alive. When she tried to work, her pen froze above the paper. When she tried to sleep, her mind replayed the sight of that little girl's fingers moving across, and replayed the sight of that little girl's fingers moving across. The piano keys, her face glowing with joy. Something inside Amelia had shifted. though she didn't quite understand how or why. For years, her life had been perfectly structured. Meetings, targets, deadlines, achievements. She had lived like a machine that couldn't stop, couldn't rest. But after hearing that song, silence suddenly felt different. The world seemed too quiet, her apartment too empty, her success too hollow. The next morning, she sat by her window sipping her coffee as the city buzzed below. But her thoughts were far away. She thought about her father, his laughter, his warm voice, and the way he used to hum the same tune every evening while she did her homework. He never became rich, but he had been happy. He used to say, "Music isn't just sound, Amelia. It's the soul talking when words can't." Back then, she hadn't understood, but now she did. At the office, Amelia walked through the lobby with her usual confidence, but something in her eyes had softened. Her assistant greeted her with a list of meetings, and she nodded absently. "Cancel the first one," she said quietly. "I'll handle something else first." Her assistant looked surprised. Amelia never canceled meetings. But she didn't ask questions. Instead of going to her office, Amelia went straight to the top-floor lounge, the same place where she had seen Ethan and Lily playing. It was empty now. The morning sunlight filtered through the huge windows, bathing the piano in golden light. She walked toward it slowly, her heels tapping lightly on the floor. Up close, the piano looked even more beautiful. Old, but graceful, polished yet slightly worn from years of quiet waiting. She ran her fingers across the lid, remembering the sound of Ethan's playing. The way the notes had trembled with emotion. She lifted the lid and pressed a single key. The soft, familiar tone filled the air. It was the same note her father had taught her when she was little. She pressed another one, and suddenly the memories came rushing back. The smell of her childhood home, the warmth of her father's laughter, the safety she used to feel. Tears stung her eyes. It was as if the piano had been waiting for her too. That evening she stayed late again, just like before. She pretended to work, but really she was waiting for that sound to return. Hours passed, and just as the city lights began to sparkle against the dark sky, she heard it. The soft tapping of keys, faint but clear. Her heart jumped. She stood up quickly and followed the melody down the hall. There, once again, through the half-open door, she saw them. The janitor and his blind daughter. This time she didn't hide. She stood quietly in the doorway, watching as they played. The music was different tonight, a little brighter, more hopeful. Lily's laughter filled the room as she tried to keep up with her father's rhythm. "Slower, Daddy," she giggled. "You're going too fast." Ethan laughed softly. "You said you wanted to play like a pro, remember?" Amelia smiled. It was such a simple moment, yet it felt profound. She had spent her life chasing power and perfection. But here were two people who had nothing, no wealth, no fame. And yet they radiated happiness. She could see the love between them in every movement. When Lily stumbled on a note, Ethan didn't correct her harshly. He just waited, patient and calm, letting her find her way back. "You're doing great," he whispered. "Don't rush. Music isn't about being perfect. It's about telling a story." Amelia's eyes welled up again. Those words, "It's about telling a story," echoed in her mind. She realized that she had been living a story too, but one without feeling. She had spent so long trying to prove her worth that she had forgotten how to simply feel alive. The rain began again outside, tapping gently on the glass walls. The sound mixed with the piano's melody, creating a harmony that seemed almost divine. Amelia closed her eyes and listened. For the first time in years, she didn't think about business reports, contracts, or profits. She just listened, to the music, to the rain, to her own heart rediscovering its rhythm. Suddenly, Lily stopped playing. "Daddy," she said softly, "someone's there." Ethan turned quickly, surprised. His eyes widened when he saw Amelia standing by the door. For a moment, silence filled the room. He looked embarrassed, almost guilty, as if he had been caught doing something wrong. "Ms. Hartman," he said quickly, standing up. I'm sorry. We didn't mean to." Amelia raised a hand gently. "Please don't stop," she said in a soft voice. "It's beautiful." Lily tilted her head curiously. "Who's that, Daddy?" Ethan smiled nervously. "She's my boss." Amelia stepped closer, her heels making barely a sound. "And you must be Lily," she said kindly. "I heard you playing last night." "You're very talented." Lily smiled shyly. "Thank you." Daddy says I can hear music better than most people. Amelia knelt slightly, her eyes level with the girls. I think he's right, she whispered. You play with your heart. Ethan stood awkwardly beside the piano, unsure of what to say. He had never spoken to the CEO before, and now here she was. Not angry, not stern, but warm, almost emotional. Amelia looked at him. You play beautifully, she said sincerely. I didn't know. He smiled humbly. It's just something I used to do. Music's been a part of me for a long time. Amelia nodded slowly, her eyes soft. Don't ever stop, she said. The world needs more people who can make it sound like that. For a long moment, they just stood there. 3 people from completely different worlds, connected by a single melody. That night when Amelia left the building, she didn't feel like the CEO of a company. She felt like a human being again, one who had remembered what it was like to be moved, to care, to feel something real. And as she stepped out into the rainy street, she realized that sometimes the smallest moments, a melody in an empty room, a smile from a stranger, a child's laughter, could awaken parts of the soul that success had long put to sleep. For a long time after that night, the image of Ethan and Lily stayed in Amelia's mind like a vivid painting. The piano glowing under the soft light, the father's gentle patience, the little girl's laughter floating through the empty hall. It wasn't something she could forget. It had stirred something deep inside her, something she hadn't felt in years, tenderness, warmth, and the ache of human connection. In the days that followed, Amelia found herself acting differently. She smiled more often, spoke to her employees with more patience, and even paused to listen when someone shared a small story about their life. People noticed the change, though no one dared to ask why. She still carried the aura of authority, but her edges had softened, her tone was gentler. Inside, she was still processing what had happened that night, how a janitor and his blind daughter had unknowingly touched her soul. For Ethan, life continued in its quiet rhythm. He worked hard as always, never expecting that anything from that evening would change his world. He was still the same humble man, sweeping the floors, mopping the marble halls, greeting people with a polite nod. But he often thought about the moment when the CEO had stepped into the room and listened to his daughter play. He had been terrified she would be angry, maybe even fire him. Instead, she had smiled. She had said his music was beautiful. It was such a simple thing, yet it felt like the world had seen him for the first time. One evening, a few days later, Amelia asked her assistant to arrange a short meeting with the janitorial staff. Nothing formal, she said. I just want to know them better. Her assistant blinked in surprise. This was new. CSOs didn't meet janitors, but Amelia insisted. When Ethan walked into her office that afternoon, he looked nervous. He held his cap in his hands and stood near the door, unsure if he should sit. Amelia looked up from her desk and smiled softly. Ethan, right? She asked. He nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Please, she said, motioning to the chair. You don't have to stand. You're not in trouble? He hesitated, then slowly sat down. I wanted to thank you, Amelia began, her voice calm and kind. The other night when I heard you and your daughter playing, it was one of the most moving things I've experienced in a long time. Ethan looked down, embarrassed but touched. Thank you, ma'am. I didn't mean to disturb anyone. I just wanted her to feel the piano. She loves it so much. Amelia smiled faintly. You didn't disturb me. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten. How beautiful life can be when it's simple, when it's real. For a moment, silence filled the office. The city stretched out behind her through the glass windows, but in that quiet space, it felt like there were only 2 people in the world. A woman rediscovering her heart and a man who had never lost his. Amelia leaned forward slightly. Ethan, may I ask, has Lily ever taken music lessons? He shook his head. No, ma'am. I can't afford it. I just teach her what I know. She nodded thoughtfully, then smiled. She's remarkable. Her ear for music is rare. I'd like to help her, if that's all right with you. Ethan's eyes widened. Help her? I have connections with a music academy we sponsor, she explained. They teach children with disabilities and they have incredible programs. I can recommend her. It would be fully funded. Ethan blinked, speechless. Ma'am, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Amelia said gently. Your daughter deserves a chance to let the world hear what she feels." For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. His throat tightened as emotion filled his chest. "Thank you," he whispered finally, his voice breaking. "I never imagined someone like you would do. I never imagined someone like you would do something like this for us." Amelia smiled again, her eyes soft. "Maybe someone should have done something like this for me once. Consider this my way of passing it on." Ethan left her office with tears in his eyes. He didn't tell Lily immediately. He wanted to surprise her. That night when they played again, his hands trembled slightly, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. As for Amelia, she stayed by the window long after Ethan left, watching the sunset fade into a pale blue sky. For the first time in a long while, she felt peaceful. There was something about helping someone else that filled a space inside her that money never could. The next week, she arranged everything with the academy. Lily would start in the beginners program, where they specialized in teaching through touch and sound. Amelia even visited the school herself to ensure it was the right place. When the day came for Ethan to bring Lily, Amelia was there, waiting outside with a smile. Lily held her father's hand tightly as they approached. "Daddy, is this where I'll learn music?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart," he said softly. "This is where your songs will grow wings." Amelia knelt beside her. "You're going to do wonderful things, Lily, I can already tell." Lily smiled, her head tilted toward the sound of Amelia's voice. "Thank you, ma'am. I'll play something for you one day. A happy song." Amelia's heart swelled. "I'd like that very much," she said. As Ethan watched them, he realized that something extraordinary had happened. A simple act of kindness had bridged two worlds that were never meant to meet. A janitor, his blind daughter, and a CEO, all connected by music, by empathy, by the invisible thread of humanity. That night, Amelia returned home and sat at her own piano for the first time in years. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the keys, but soon the melody flowed, the same one she had heard Ethan and Lily play. This time it was her heart telling the story, and for the first time since she was a little girl, Amelia Hartman played not for success, not for perfection, but simply beautifully, for love. The days that followed felt different for everyone. The air seemed lighter, the world a little kinder. For Ethan and Lily, life slowly began to change in ways they had never imagined. And for Amelia, something inside her had awakened, a quiet, steady light that she hadn't felt since her childhood. Lily started attending the music academy that week. The first day was both exciting and frightening for her. She held her father's hand tightly as they entered the classroom filled with sounds, pianos, violins, laughter, and the soft rustle of pages turning. The teachers were kind, their voices gentle and encouraging. They helped her feel the piano keys, taught her how to count rhythms, and introduced her to other children who learned through sound rather than sight. When Ethan picked her up after class, she was glowing. "Daddy," she said, her voice full of joy. "They said I play by heart." "They said that's very rare." Ethan smiled, fighting back tears. "I already knew that, sweetheart." Every evening they still went to the lounge at work, not to hide but to celebrate. The piano had become their little stage, a place where dreams took shape. Lily's music began to change. It grew more confident, more alive. Each time she played, it was as if she was painting the air with invisible colors. Sometimes Amelia would stop by quietly and listen. She no longer hid behind the door. She would stand in the open now, smiling, her arms folded softly as she watched. She had become more than the CEO to them. She was a friend, a protector, and in many ways, a bridge between two worlds that rarely touched. One evening, after Lily finished her song, Amelia clapped softly. Lily turned toward the sound. "Did you like it?" she asked, grinning. "I loved it," Amelia said warmly. "You play with more heart every time I hear you." Lily giggled. "Daddy says when I play I should imagine people smiling even if I can't see them." "Are you smiling now?" Amelia's eyes shimmered. "Yes, Lily," she whispered. "I'm smiling." Ethan stood beside his daughter, his gaze meeting Amelia's. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. You've given her a chance I could never have imagined." Amelia shook her head gently. "You gave her that chance," she said. "You taught her love and patience. I only opened a door." They all stood there for a moment, surrounded by the soft hum of the city beyond the glass windows. Rain had started to fall again, but it didn't sound sad anymore. It sounded alive, like applause from the sky. Months passed and Lily flourished at the academy. She began performing in small recitals, where her playing often moved audiences to tears. She couldn't see the applause, but she could feel it, the warmth in the air, the trembling energy of hearts touched by her music. Each time she finished a song, she would turn her head slightly and whisper, "That one was for you, Daddy." Ethan would always be there, sitting quietly in the crowd, his eyes glistening with pride. He no longer felt invisible. For so long he had believed he was just another face in the background of life, a man who cleaned up after others. But now when people spoke to him, they called him Lily's father. And to him, that title meant everything. As for Amelia, the transformation in her life was just as profound. She began to reconnect with the things she had lost: compassion, laughter, humanity. She reintroduced small joys into her life, having dinner with her staff, visiting the academy to watch the children play, sometimes even volunteering to help organize music events. Her company noticed the change too. Meetings became warmer, the atmosphere lighter. Employees no longer feared her. They respected her deeply, not just as a leader but as a person. She still ran the business with strength and precision, but now there was empathy behind her every decision. One afternoon, Amelia received a handwritten note on her desk. The paper was slightly smudged with pencil marks and the handwriting was uneven, but the message was clear. "Thank you for helping me find my music. When I play, I think of you listening beyond the door. Love, Lily." Amelia held the note to her heart, tears forming once again. She kept it in her desk drawer, reading it whenever the noise of the world grew too loud. A year later, the company held a charity concert to support children with disabilities. It was Amelia's idea, inspired by Lily. The final performer that night was an 8-year-old blind pianist whose music silenced the room. She played a melody that sounded familiar, full of warmth and love, the same melody that once echoed through an empty office hall late at night. When the final note faded, the audience rose to their feet in applause. Ethan, standing in the corner, clapped the loudest, tears glistening in his eyes. Amelia stood too, her palms pressed together, her face glowing with pride. Lily smiled, tilting her head toward the sound. "Daddy," she whispered, "I think people can hear love tonight." "Yes, sweetheart," he replied softly, his voice trembling. "They can." Amelia felt her heart swell as she looked at them. She knew she would never forget this, not the song, not the people, not the night that changed everything. That melody, born from a janitor's quiet heart, a blind girl's courage, and a woman's rediscovered soul, had become something greater than any of them. It was a reminder that kindness doesn't need grand gestures, and that music, like love, has the power to reach even the farthest, coldest corners of the human heart. And so, as the lights dimmed and the applause echoed through the hall, Amelia closed her eyes for a moment and let the sound wash over her. For the first time in years, she felt complete, not as a CEO, not as a businesswoman, but simply as a human being who had learned to listen again.